बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय गोपी जनवल्लभा गिरिवरधारी जय गोपी जनवल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोदानन्दना व्रज जनरञ्जना यशोदानन्दना व्रज जनरञ्जना यमुनातीरा वनचारि यमुनातीरा वनचारि जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय राधा गोपी जना वल्लभा राधा गोपी जना वल्लभा जय निताय पतिता पावन गौरा हरि निताय पतिता पावन गौरा हरि प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तरस्तत हिज डिवाइन ग्रेस अभय चरण अरविंद भक्ति वेदांता स्वामी श्रीला प्रभुपाद की जय जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तरस्तत हिज डिवाइन ग्रेस श्रीमद् भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय नामाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की जय श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जीवा को पाल भट्ट दास गोस्वामी प्रभुगण की जय प्रेम से बहुत जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैता गदाधार श्रीवासादि श्री गौर भक्तवृंद श्री श्री राधा गोपी जन वल्लभ गोप गोपीनाथ श्यामा कुंड राधा कुंड गिरिराज गोवर्धन की जय मथुरा वृंदावन धाम की जय मायापुर नवदीप धाम की जय पुरुषोत्तम क्षेत्र श्री जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय श्री एक चक्र धाम की जय गंगा मैया यमुना मैया की जय भक्ति देवी तुलसी महारानी की जय समवैत गौर भक्त वृंद की जय निताय गौ प्रेमानंद all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all assembled devotees, all glories to Lotus feet. Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamanyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Sha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurami Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha नमः ओम विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्ता स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैता गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंदा हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे 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 रामा राम राम हरे हरे मुखं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं दीनतारिणं परमानन्दमाधवं श्रीचैतन्य ईश्वरम्. We are reading from Shrimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 31, verse number 14. या पंचभूता रचिते रहिता शरीरे छन्नो यथेन्द्रियगुणार्थचित् आत्मकोऽहम् तेनाविकुण्ठमहिमानं ऋषिं तमेनं वन्दे परं प्रकृतिपुरुषयो पुमांसम् या पञ्चभूता रचिते रहिता शरीरे छन्नो यथेन्द्रियगुणार्थचिदात्मकम् हम् तेनाविकुण्ठमहिमानं ऋषिं तमेनं वन्दे परं प्रकृतिपुरुषयो पुमांसम् या पञ्चभूतरचिते रहिता शरीरे छन्नो यथेन्द्रियगुणार्थचिदात्मकोऽहम् तेनाविकुण्ठमहिमानं ऋषिं तमेनं वन्दे परं प्रकृतिपुरुषयो पुमांसम्. Synonyms. Yahu Panchabhuta, five gross elements, Rachite, made of, Rahitaha, separated, Sharire, in the material body, Channaha, covered, Ayatha, unfitly, Indriya, senses, Guna, qualities, Artha, objects of senses, Chit, ego, Atmakaha, consisting of, Aham, I, Tena, by a material body, Avikuntha Mahimanam, whose glories are unobscured, Rishim, all knowing, Tam, that, Enam, unto him. One day I offer obeisances. Param, transcendental. Prakriti, to material nature. Purushayo, to the living entities. Umam, Sam, unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. I am separated from the Supreme Lord because of my being in this material body, which is made of five elements, and therefore my qualities and senses are being misused. Although I am essentially spiritual, because the Supreme Personality of Godhead is transcendental to material nature and the living entities, because he is devoid of such a material body, and because he is always glorious in his spiritual qualities, I offer my obeisances unto him. So this is a verse spoken by a jiva in a womb of a mother, especially a human mother, and he is lamenting. Srila Prabhupada says it is common for a good soul to lament whenever he or she does something wrong. And this jiva in the womb of a mother is lamenting for being sitting there because of his past, for not being worshipping the Lord, and now he is placed again in the womb. We see Bhaktivinoda Thakur also saying, after saying his whole life, of course, in his natural humility, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says how throughout his life as a childhood he went in playing As a boyhood went in chasing after girls. As he grew older, went in going from places to places for the sake of money. As he grew further, marriage, taking care of children. As he grew further, the responsibilities just overcame. Um, and then finally, um, now the soul has entered into an old age. And the lamentation is the living entity did not properly worship the Supreme Personality of God. And now there is a lamentation. Then Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his natural humility, he is saying, now I'm waiting to be placed in the womb of a mother again. So here the living entity, he is comparing his condition to the condition of the Supreme Lord. And he's sharing that I am separated from the Supreme Lord because of my being in this material body, which is made of 5 elements. And therefore, my qualities and senses are being misused, although I am essentially spiritual. So, living entity is realizing, it is said that the moment living entity comes out, the living entity is covered by material nature. When the living entity is within the womb of a mother, the living entity has no material desires. The living entity does not want, hmm, there is no bhog, there is no tel, there is no acceptance, there is no rejection. Does not want wealth, does not want fame, does not want beauty, does not want does not want anything, because the living entity is understands that I am essentially spiritual, and I am part and parcel of the Lord. But because I am placed in the material body, which is made up of Panchabhutas, and um, there because the living entity is bound by the gunas, and because the living entity has material senses, these gunas and these material senses always divert the living entity away from the service of the Lord. Sometimes there is an effect of tamoguna, sometimes there is an effect of rajoguna, sometimes there is an effect of sattva, and then the senses are also very powerful. And all these together, the living entity is lamenting. It is also interesting that living entities in the womb, um, but he understands that I'm in a material body. Means his consciousness is, he does not have material desire. He's lamenting for his current situation, the position he's placed in, and then he is aspiring to attain the natural constitutional position. And that's why Srila Prabhupada says, as long as we're in this material world, it is hard struggle for the existence. To exist, there is struggle actually. And then the Jiva soul, Januta Uvacha, the Jiva soul, he is comparing his condition to the condition of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he says that because the Supreme Personality of Godhead is transcendental to material nature, in other words, he is not affected by gunas and the living entities, because he is devoid of such a material body. His body is not material, and the material nature works under his direction. And because he is always glorious in his spiritual qualities, Krishna has 64 qualities in full. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. So the living entity is comparing his temporary precarious situation of being diverted because of the effect of the gunas and the senses of the body in which he is placed in, compared to the Lord who is always transcendental. Therefore, the living entity is offering his humble obeisances. Ultimately, the overall prayer is, my Lord, when I will come um, out of this of the mother's womb, I will not do anything other than engage in loving service to you. Purport by His Divine Grace, Yasi Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Because ultimately that is the only reality. The only reality Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur says the only reality is the holy name. Vaishnavas, they are the only reality. But the material world is also very consuming. If we are not, that's why um, Lord Krishna says to Arjuna in um, 15th chapter Bhagavad Gita, when he compares this material world with Ashwat, or a banyan tree. And Ashwat also means that which will not be there tomorrow. In other words, everything here is temporary. Ashwat. And there, Krishna says, with a weapon of detachment, cut the strong roots to this um, reflection, reflection of the original tree, and focus the mind onto the Supreme Lord who lies somewhere else. Basically, the real tree. The real tree is the spiritual world, and the reflection is the material world. So Krishna says, with the weapon of detachment. And it is also said that detachment is also the natural mm, byproduct of bhakti. Knowledge and detachment, gyan and vairagya are the natural byproduct of bhakti, but this is not the gyan which we can acquire by reading, but this is the realization. And when the realization comes, detachment will naturally come. When the realization comes of who I am, what is who am I? Who I am is basically what is self-realization. Who I am when one becomes more and more fixed in the sambandha gyan. Um, more and more fixed in sambandha gyan is more and more fixed in our relationship. More and more fixed in our relationship is Sanatana Goswami asked Kayami Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says Jivara Sarupa Krishna Nityadas. And among we are everyone there is Ekala Ishvara Krishna Ara Sabha Bhritya. Krishna alone is Ishvara. Everybody else is a servant. Whether his incarnations or whether the separated part and parcels, everybody are Sabha Everyone else uh, is a servant. And when we fix ourselves while living in this world, if we can fix ourselves in the sambandha, then our activities become steady purposes. In another words, our activity becomes, then we become unattached and we become steady. When we become free from material designation, and we become free from material designation by fixing ourselves in our original real designation, like Prabhupada says, our constitutional position. This jiva who is within the womb of a mother is fixed in his constitutional position, that I am bound here and my goal is to acquire you. We will naturally, when the goal is clear, we will naturally put our energy to attain that goal. Everybody in this material world is working behind some goals, either a good job or a higher position or um, popularity. Everyone, all of our, based on what we want, our actions are, um, are an attempt to attain something. Everything we do is an attempt to our goal of what we really want. And when that goal is clear, the problem is the goal is not clear. And when the goal is not clear, then the living entity is in a confused state of mind. He has theoretical understanding, but he is acting on a materialistic platform. So uh, that's why knowledge does not come by reading, but knowledge comes by bhakti. By devotional service itself, the realization comes, and when one becomes fixed in one's constitutional position, one's goal, then renunciation comes. Then detachment will come. It is natural. Even like businessmen, people whose goal is very clear, they can reduce their sleeping, they can reduce their eating, they can control their senses, they can give up so many things because their goal is clear. It's very interesting how Prahlad Maharaj told Hiranyakashipu. Today morning I was listening a lecture. Prahlad Maharaj told Hiranyakashipu, because of your uncontrolled mind and senses. Uh, and His Holiness Sadhana Swami Maharaj was mentioning. Hiranyakashipu performed severe austerities. There was an ant hill formed. He controlled his mind and senses to such an extent that he pleased Brahmadev. Om Brahmadevaya Namah, and Brahmadev appealed to him. So, how much great control of mind and senses he had in order to do such severe austerities without eating, cutting off the demand of the senses, cutting off the various comfort that the mind is desiring. How much he had to cut off in order to perform that austerity. In Prahlad Maharaj, after doing all the austerities and attaining those powers, an attempt to become immortal, Prahlad Maharaj is telling him, my dear father, the best of the demons, because of your uncontrolled mind and senses, you have been bound, therefore you should go to Vrindavan and you should worship Vishnu, Krishna there. So there also his senses are uncontrolled, because why his senses are uncontrolled, or why his mind is uncontrolled? Prabhupada says the mind is uncontrolled because it is not fixed on the lotus feet of Krishna. The mind and senses is fixed on um, mind and senses is fixed on a material goal, a material desire. I want to become supreme. I want to be worshipped. And those desires, for those desires, although one may control the mind and senses, still they are considered uncontrolled because no understanding of the lotus feet of Krishna. So Prabhupada says that's why it's not a steady position, a stable position. One can fall down from that situation any point of time. So because of lack of clarity of Sambandha Gyan, one will always remain attached to this material world. And as a baby in the womb, there are no such attachment. But when he comes out, because he loses, Maya has a Shakti, um, which makes us forget our true identity, our eternal position. And because he identifies himself with the world, now he has made many goals. Um, Popularity, name, fame, power, wealth, position. Because a living entity has formed many goals, now all his actions are driven in that direction. But when our Sambandha Gyan is clear, when our goal is clear, then our action will be driven towards that direction. That's why initially bhakti is performed just because it's the right thing to do. And by the bhakti itself, the knowledge comes. And with the knowledge, renunciation comes. Krishna says in 14th chapter. In 4th chapter, renunciation will be natural effect. And renunciation cannot be artificial. I mean, I don't want it, but then unless we are developing attachment to Krishna, unless we are realizing our true identity, Prabhupada says non-attachment is not possible. We'll always be attached to something. So the difference between a living entity and the Supreme Personality of Godhead is that the living entity is prone to be subjected to material nature. It's prone to be subjected. Prabhupada also says um, to be influenced by lust and greed. Prabhupada says is not uncommon because we have been associating with these elements since time immemorial, and when our more further degrades, then it will take up the action of anger and envy. And most of us are not free from these things. And we can very much relate that the living entity is prone to be subjected to material nature. Whereas the Supreme Godhead is always transcendental to material nature as well as to the living entities. Krishna is always para, we are apara. Krishna is always transcendental, we are bound. When the living entity is put into material nature, then his senses and qualities are polluted or designated. Because we take various designations. We assume various designations. It can be a mother, a father, a child, a husband, a wife. It can be a position. It can be educational, a degree. These are all designations. And naturally, various designations brings attachments. When the living entity is put into material nature, then his senses and qualities are polluted or designated. We have pure sense and pure qualities. The living entity has pure qualities when he is in the spiritual world, pure senses. But when it comes to material nature, everything is polluted or designated. There is no possibility for the Supreme Lord to become embodied by material qualities or material senses. The Lord never comes in contact with three guna. All Krishna's activities are transcendental. And Krishna says, one who understands this will come to me. Those who understand that everything connected to Krishna is pure and transcendental. But naturally, because we may not be pure and transcendental, we because of our own qualities, we may bring, because of our own qualities being material by nature, we have a natural tendency to bring the qualities of Krishna. Also, we also we may conceive Krishna's activities on a material platform because ourselves being affected by those lower, proper base qualities, lower qualities. And because there is a natural tendency to bring that, we cannot realize Krishna's transcendental quality unless we become transcendental. To the extent we are affected by the modes, to that extent we will also bring Krishna accordingly. Prabhupada also says it takes one to know one. We can understand how the spiritual master is transcendental when we become transcendental. We cannot understand one who is superior to us in their Krishna consciousness. We cannot understand them uh, if they are if if they are more advanced than us. Takes one to know one. So there is no possibility. But the Lord, although Lord is always transcendental, there is no possibility for the Supreme Lord to become embodied by material qualities or material essence, for he is above the influence of material nature and cannot possibly be put in the darkness of ignorance like the living entities. The position of the Lord is always steady. It is said in one of the prayers by demigods prayed to Vishnu. Yesterday we were reading that the Lord position is always steady because His Lord always situated in a transcendental position. The Lord always knows that He is Supreme Personality of God, everything emanates from me. The material nature works under His direction. Wherever He goes, whatever situation He is in, the Lord is always steady in His position. He is always acting from a steady position, and so are the pure devotees also always acting from a steady position or um, from a self-realized perspective, and they see everything from that vision, from a realized platform. But Prabhupada says, but we, because we have material designation, we identify ourselves with material designation, we cannot be steady, and therefore there is attachment, and the result is there is misery or lack of clarity of Samandagya, which also is revealed by the process of bhakti only. That's all part of knowledge, and that's how brings detachment from this material world Unless we develop detachment from this material world, how will we go back to God? Obviously, we cannot go back. But the process is not artificial, process is uh, devotional service itself. There is no possibility for the Supreme Lord to become embodied by material qualities or material senses. For he is above the influence of material nature and cannot possibly be put in the darkness of ignorance like the living entity, because he is steady in his position. Because of his full knowledge, he is never subjected to the influence of material nature. Material nature is always under his control, and it is therefore not possible that the material nature can control the Supreme Personality of God. He is always beyond, and Maya can never touch the Supreme Lord. When the Supreme Lord creates, he takes the form of Lord Shiva. When the Lord is touched by Rajagun, immediately Lord Shiva appears. Brahma Samhita explains like milk touched by yogurt converts into yogurt. Likewise, the Lord, in order to create, immediately transforms into Shiva Tattva. But the Lord himself is like Narayan, Krishna, or any of the incarnation of Krishna, never touched by even the tinge of material nature. Since the identity of the living entity is very minute, he is prone to be subjected to material nature. And we are very minuscule, very tiny. So we are prone to be subjected to material nature, which is tamogun, rajagun, sattvagun. We are prone to be influenced by those moods. And when we become influenced by those moods, it depends upon um, when Krishna removes his protection. When we are sincerely practicing devotional service, Krishna covers us, and we can be focused on practicing our Krishna consciousness peacefully. But whenever the living entity does a mistake, the mistake can be done either through speaking, through action, through thoughts. Whenever the living entity does any mistake, the Lord withdraws his protection. When the Lord withdraws the protection, the living entity becomes susceptible, prone to the modes of material nature. And that is also the mercy of the Lord, so the living entity can become more and more careful. That's why there is, um, it is said, Lord Krishna says, even the realized souls should not give up austerity. Austerity, charity, and sacrifice, they should not be given up even by realized souls. And the austerity Krishna describes as austerity of speech, austerity of body, austerity of mind. And when we deviate from those austerities, we become prone to be subjected to material nature. But when he is freed from this material body, which is false, he attains the same spiritual nature as a supreme Lord. As long as we are there, struggle will be there. I asked one devotee today morning, so Prabhu, how are you doing? Ecstatic. He said, no, Prabhu, ecstatic I can feel only after I go there. As long as I'm here, I don't think that is, I mean, or fully purified. I don't think that is possible. So when he is freed from this material body, which is false, he attains the same spiritual nature as the Supreme Lord. At that time, there is no qualitative difference between him and the Supreme. Same in quality, Satchitananda. But because he is not so quantitatively powerful as to never be put under the influence of material nature, he is, he is quantitatively different from the Lord. The Lord, wherever he goes, always steady and situated in his transcendental position. The living entity is prone, subjected, and that's why we are very small in quantity, very minuscule, infinitesimally small. And the material nature can immediately capture us, and we'll be like again. Prabhupada was giving an example of a prison. A prisoner has no freedom. A prisoner is forced to either cut the stone, cook, or clean, wash the dishes. Every prisoner is controlled by the laws of the prison. They are not given any freedom. They are given the limited amount of food. Everything, they are just bound by their schedule, and if they don't do it, they are beaten up. They are punished severely. So, prison means we are controlled, we are bound. And Prabhupada said this word is a prison house because we are all controlled by the three modes. But nobody can be happy in a prison house in a controlled state. And likewise, nobody can be happy when he is controlled by the three modes. That time there is no, okay, yeah. So the living entity is of the same spiritual nature, qualitatively Satchitananda, but quantity wise he's um, prone to material contamination. The entire process of devotional service is to purify oneself of this contamination of material nature and put oneself on the spiritual platform where he is qualitatively one with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is very nice. The entire, very encouraging, hope giving. The entire process of devotional service. What is the essence? What is the goal? Purpose? The entire process of devotional service is to purify oneself of this contamination of material nature. Is that we want to become free from three modes and put oneself on a spiritual platform where he is qualitatively one with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We can be happy only when we bring or when we purify ourselves from, when we free ourselves from the effect of the three gunas and come to a transcendental platform, put oneself on a spiritual platform. Yeah, that is the goal. And that is what bhakti will do. Bhakti is very much encouraged by Lord Krishna and described by Lord Krishna as the only means to purify our existence. Arjuna also asked this question: how can a living entity become free from the effect of the three gunas? And Lord Krishna says, 14th chapter, second last verse, Mam Chaya Vyabhicharin Bhakti Yogana Sevate Sakuna Samati Taita Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpate. He comes to the level of Brahman or comes to a transcendental platform by Avyabhichari Bhakti, undeviated devotional service. And that's why Prabhupada also says the path of devotional service is a path of training where we are trying to engage ourselves in devotional service. Yesterday I was reading a lecture by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada said we should cut our eating and sleeping. And recently I was hearing His Holiness Sadhana Swami Maharaj, he was telling me, oversleeping is a sinful activity. I was thinking, wow, like the sinful activities, illicit sex, gambling, intoxication, meat eating. These are sinful activities that we give up. And Maharaj was mentioning oversleeping is also a sinful activity. Very, very advanced platform. Maharaj was giving the example of Raghunath Das Goswami. Very depressing actually to hear. And not depressing, but seems very far. He will take a little bit of buttermilk and he would think, I'm wasting my time in sense gratification. And I'm like, I cannot even listen that state of but naturally it's something that cannot be mimicked. It's something that comes by the grace of the Lord. But what we can do is we can engage ourselves. Of course, the goal is very, very far, where the absorption that devotees attain and the real and the control they have, uh, the goal is very, very far. But in our stage of immature Krishna consciousness, The only hope we have is more and more engagement in our either Shravanam when there is free time. We try to hear. We chant minimum 16 rounds. And then remaining time, whatever extra time we have, we try to engage in some form of Krishna conscious activity. Either like some of us are engaged very much in outreach activities, some are engaged in more reading, different devotees have different interests. Krishna does not give a preference over of one service or another. There are bhajanandis, there are ghoshyanandis, those who like to do bhajan, those who like to do prachar. Both kind of living entities are there. Of course, our mood of our sampradayas, we are propagators of the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But both kind of living entities, either who like to do bhajan or who like to do prachar, the goal remains the same as somehow or other remain within Krishna's zone. In the Vedas, it is said that the living entity is always free. Asango hi ayam purusha. The living entity is liberated. He is always free. His material contamination is temporary, and his actual position is that he is liberated. So yes, it is very. I mean, this is also very hope-giving statement. Yes, we are very absorbed by the three gunas. Um, Prabhupada says his material contamination is temporary. Brahmaji also says, once, I mean, it is said, once the process once began cannot stop. And Prabhupada says, if you just chant your 16 rounds for regulative principle, you will be dragged to success. So it's very hope giving. We see those who remain sincere, we see like most of Srila Prabhupada disciples, they have very deep taste in hearing and chanting. So it's very encouraging that as time passes by, everything will be given to us. And although at our current state may not be very healthy with respect to our influence of the three modes, the material contamination is temporary process. The living entity is liberated. We are always liberated soul. The soul is always pure. Having begun the process of bhakti itself is our great fortune. Sometimes we see the goal and we feel like, oh, I don't know if I will ever get there. But if you see where we are today, I mean, I'm sure most of us are chanting 16 rounds, and I think many of us are initiated. When we begin our Krishna consciousness, we could never think that I can even chant 16 rounds someday. How is that possible? So, what is like Sagar Maharaj says, what seems impossible today will become possible tomorrow. Because, like Prabhupada says, don't underestimate the path of the power of bhakti. But then it just have lesser Prabhupada just stay in a boat, just keep going, keep going. It's very encouraging. Prabhupada says material contamination is temporary. Eventually, we will all be with Krishna. We will all be engaging in his loving pastimes. We will all, all of us will not have death, will not have disease, will not have old age. All of us will be eternally in our particular relationship with the Lord. And having taken the process itself is like our good fortune has already opened. All we have to do is just remain there. But Prabhupada also says, if we break the regulated principles, then we cut off ourselves from the mercy of the Lord. So Prabhupada says, just be strict with following the regulated principles and chanting 16 rounds. The material contamination is temporary. If not this life, another life. If not another life, another life. And Krishna is very kind. Krishna will certainly, Krishna will certainly connect us to devotees. Even if we cannot attain perfection in this life, Krishna will certainly connect us to devotees. And gradually, no matter how degraded souls we are, Krishna says, after the verse Abhichesa Durachara, at the end of 9th chapter, he says, whether you are Shudra, whether you are Malecha, whether you are blah, 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 whatever you are, Krishna says, um, anybody engaged in my devotional service will come to me, will become purified. So yes, we are low born, may not be very qualified souls, but the path is hopeful. No matter who you are, you will come to me if you engage in the process of devotional service. We say one holy name, of course, should the name we say can purify more sins than what we can commit in many lifetimes. So the path is described, and one of the offenses is to consider the glories of devotional service and the holy name to be an exaggeration. That becomes one of the offense. So the path is very powerful, but at the same time, Krishna wants us to come back soon. And operation is not always, I mean, it's never, operation is never peaceful. It's never, joyful. And likewise, um, um, we are right now undergoing an operation of purification. And we are pushing ourselves. We are trying to be sincere. We are pushing ourselves. We are praying to Krishna, my Lord, please engage us in your service. We work in progress. We are working on ourselves. And slowly, Bhakti will give us everything. Bhakti will give realization. Bhakti will give renunciation. One time, His Holiness Arana Swami Maharaj was mentioning in Chicago. Maharaj said, we are not better than anybody. Maharaj says, we don't become proud, and no matter what state of progress we have made, because we are not better than anybody, because it's just a matter of time that everybody will attain perfection. Just a matter of time that everybody will attain perfection, as long as we just stick to it. So the material contamination is temporary, and his actual position is that he is liberated. This liberation is achieved by Krishna consciousness, which begins from the point of surrender. Therefore, it is said, I offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Person. So that's all I have. If there is any discussion, we can take. Otherwise, we can. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandavat Pranam. Thank you so much for a wonderful class, Prabhu. Many insights you shared. Um, I just had one clarification there. When you talk about the jiva being in the like jiva means we only um, in the womb of a mother, can we say that the jiva would be thinking at that play at that time nadanam na janam na sundarim?
No, my understanding is those things are not even manifested in Jiva. He's in a pure
Wow.
state. He's like he just lamenting and that I didn't worship you, now I will only do that. But then when the Jiva comes out, and then as he passes through the world, and as he sees like bad association, what we are looking for, oh that is nice, I also want this. And based on Jiva also has karma. That karma from previous life, once he grows little elder, those desires will come back from the previous life's karma, those desires. Like we say that when we perform a sinful activity, the proclivity, kutam, is enhanced. And likewise, we have many proclivities or many inclinations that take the form of desire. That also comes from the Lord. Matta jnanam, matta smriti jnanam apohanamcha. Remembrance, forgetfulness comes from me. And that remembrance of what I want, that Krishna gives the remembrance, and I start working in that direction. And when the karma bandhana is gone by surrender, as Prabhupada says, aham tom sarva papebhyo, um, then bhakti remove that inclination, that desires. But when the living entity is in the womb, he is in a pure state. Somehow the subtle body does not interact there. But ultimately the pure living entity cannot go back. The process is what we are following. But he does not have those conceptions. He's just Krishna, and just that's my understanding.
Amazing, Prabhu. Just one more clarification there. Um, when we talk about the past life conditioning, some maybe you can enlighten there. I vaguely remember, even in the Ajamil's case, it is said it was because of his previous life. Whatever fall down had happened for him, it's just because of the previous life proclivity. The question here is that um, when a devotee is practicing bhakti, the past life conditionings keep hindering. Is there a still possibility while practicing bhakti one may fall down because of the previous life conditioning?
Yes, Prabhu. My understanding on that is Krishna gives protection, and Krishna withdraws the protection. See, once somebody comes to Krishna consciousness, it is highly, highly encouraging. First, Krishna gives protection, and we forget our conditioning. Those desires are covered over, and we can just keep focusing on um, how to how to enhance our Krishna consciousness. When we make some mistake, either in the thought or in the words or in the action or all three of them, then Krishna removes that protection. Um, or when we break a regulatory principle in a subtle form or gross form, in various ways, everything happens by Krishna removing his protection, and then the conditioning come back to us, and um, then the living entity, because he's practicing devotional service, he quickly starts lamenting. Um, and then slowly again he becomes situated, and Krishna says the living entity. Many times he falls and he rises up, he falls, he rises up, he falls, he rises up. Every time he severely limits. And after few of those instances, gradually he becomes fixed, and he walks straight on the path of straight on the path towards me. Just like Prabhupada gives an example, a child walk in the beginning, he tries and he falls down, he tries, he falls down, he tries, he falls down, and then he walks steadily. Likewise, our state from initial till we attain certain purity in our Krishna consciousness, our path is like child learning to walk. And once we become steady, the progress is more faster, but success is guaranteed. Krishna, even if somebody, I mean, only thing we have to be to some extent careful is um, not to offend devotees intentionally. That's if that one thing we are careful, other things here and there, and then we should try our best. Um, Success is guaranteed.
Very hopeful, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Bhakti is actually always hopeful. You know, we have the right direction. So
The problem is not at the process, Prabhu. Problem is myself. That's the challenge you have to solve. And there are so many three modes of material nature, past life conditioning. So many things are just beyond our control, actually. Everything actually is beyond our control.
they just hammer us and we are like we are helpless living entity. But then we have one Mahaban, or great weapon we have is shelter. It brings humility, which is very, very wonderful quality. Our own mistakes brings humility, lamentation, very wonderful. And if we are just trying to be sincere, Krishna assures we'll go back. Just we have to keep get up and walk, get up and walk, get up and walk.
You beautifully also mentioned about goals. We should live a goal oriented life. I was thinking, at least at my level, it's not just enough to set up the goals, but to be mindful about that goal every minute. I was just hearing Sachinandan Maharaj. He specifically mentioned about New Year resolution. He said every day we should contemplate on what is my goal, whether I'm heading towards that part. I feel that is an important aspect. For some people who are in mode of sattva, they set up the goal, they run. There's no doubt. But for people like me, where ignorance is more, passion is more, realigning that goal, being mindful about that goal every day, I think that's a very, very important aspect I felt.
Mhm. Yes, Prabhu, thank you for saying that. We'll work on this. Okay. Grateful for this opportunity. Thank you all for joining. If I spoke anything wrong, please forgive me as a humble servant. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubheva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavendra. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Shri Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Krishna Prabhu ki jai.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you,
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Dandavat pranam.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Please accept me humble.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Dandavat pranam.
Thank you, Prabhuji.